There comes a stage in a woman's life when everything she once tolerated starts to suffocate her. The routine, the silence, the emotional distance, it all becomes unbearable. Midlife doesn't just change women, it exposes what they've been pretending to accept. And that's where most marriages begin to quietly fall apart. Women's emotional reawakening in midlife isn't sudden. It's a quiet process that builds for years beneath the surface. A woman can spend decades being everything for everyone, a wife, a mother, a daughter, a professional, while slowly losing touch with who she really is. In her 20s and 30s, her focus is on creating stability and pleasing others. She learns to adapt, to compromise, to prioritize harmony over truth. She convinces herself that fulfillment will come through family, love, or external success. But as the years pass, something inside her begins to whisper that this version of life, though comfortable, isn't truly hers. That whisper turns into a voice she can no longer ignore. And it's this voice that marks the beginning of her emotional reawakening. This awakening is not about rebellion, it's about awareness. Around midlife, a woman starts to look at her life with clearer eyes. She begins to notice how much she's given and how little she's received emotionally in return. The things that once brought her joy, being needed, being appreciated, being loved in small ways, suddenly stop feeling enough. She starts to feel unseen, even when she's surrounded by people. That's when she begins to question not just her marriage, but her entire sense of identity. She realizes that she has built her worth on what she does for others, not on who she is for herself. It's a painful realization because it means confronting the truth that her emotional hunger was never really satisfied. It was only managed. During this stage, a woman often experiences confusion, guilt, and emotional exhaustion. She can't explain why she feels so restless, why she cries without reason, or why her husband's silence hurts more than it used to. It's not about him changing. It's about her awakening to what she truly needs. The surface stability of the marriage begins to feel fragile because she's starting to crave emotional authenticity over comfort. She no longer wants to pretend that everything is fine just to keep the peace. This shift can be terrifying for both partners because it challenges the very foundation of the relationship. The man sees her pulling away, becoming distant, asking questions he never expected. But she's not drifting towards someone else. She's trying to find her way back to herself. Her emotional reawakening also comes with a new sense of self-awareness. She starts to see the patterns she's been repeating, the people-pleasing, the silence during conflict, the fear of being misunderstood. She begins to recognize how much of her identity has been shaped by what others expected from her. This awareness doesn't make her angry at anyone, it makes her hungry for truth. She wants deeper conversations, emotional connection, and meaning. She starts reading, reflecting, or exploring spiritual and emotional growth. She no longer wants to live in autopilot mode. This transformation isn't loud or dramatic. It's internal, but powerful enough to shift the dynamics of every relationship around her. And yet, this is where most marriages begin to struggle because the woman who once accepted emotional distance now questions it. The woman who once tolerated neglect now feels suffocated by it. Her husband may see this as dissatisfaction or rebellion, but it's really her awakening to her unmet emotional needs. She's realizing that she doesn't want to live half alive, just existing within the boundaries of duty. She wants emotional intimacy, presence, and understanding, things she might have once settled without. This new awareness brings both clarity and chaos. It exposes what's been missing all along, and once that truth is seen, it cannot be unseen. When a woman reaches midlife, something subtle yet powerful starts to happen within her. The emotional needs she buried years ago begin to rise to the surface, demanding attention. For years, she told herself she was fine, that love was about endurance, not expression, that being appreciated sometimes was enough, that emotional emptiness was just part of marriage. But over time, those suppressed emotions build pressure, and midlife becomes the point where the weight of everything she's ignored starts to feel unbearable. She begins to realize how deeply she's craved connection, understanding, and validation, and how little of it she's actually received. This realization doesn't come overnight. It comes in quiet moments when she feels unseen at the dinner table, unheard during an argument, or untouched by words that used to feel like love. In her younger years, she was taught to adjust. She learned that good women don't complain, that keeping the family together is more important than expressing personal needs. So she silenced her disappointment. When she felt emotionally neglected, she turned her focus toward children, work, or responsibilities. She filled the emptiness with busyness, convincing herself that love always feels this way: steady but passionless, predictable but disconnected. She kept telling herself this is just marriage, and continued to serve, give, and adapt. But with every unspoken feeling, she slowly disconnected from herself. She became so used to taking care of others that she forgot what it felt like to be emotionally cared for. Then, one day, she starts noticing things she used to overlook. Her husband's emotional absence becomes louder, his silence heavier. The casual disregard she once brushed off now stings. She starts feeling resentful, not because she suddenly changed, but because she's finally acknowledging her own emotional starvation. The needs she suppressed: affection, appreciation, deep communication, resurface with urgency. She begins to see how long she's been trying to pour from an empty cup, giving endlessly without ever feeling refilled. What hurts most is realizing she once thought love meant sacrifice, when in reality it should have meant mutual nourishment. This phase is deeply misunderstood by many men. When a woman starts voicing her unmet needs, it can sound like criticism or dissatisfaction, but it's not an attack. It's a plea for connection. She doesn't want to fight. She wants to feel seen. She's not asking for perfection. She's asking for emotional presence. Yet, when her husband doesn't understand the language of emotional intimacy, she starts to feel lonelier inside the marriage than she ever did outside of it. She may still love him, but the lack of emotional safety begins to erode that love quietly. She starts to feel invisible in her own home, like a stranger living beside someone who no longer sees her essence. As her emotional needs surface, she starts remembering parts of herself she had buried. The spontaneous, curious, passionate side that once dreamed of connection and adventure. The part that wanted to be touched not just physically, but emotionally. The part that wanted conversations about feelings, not just logistics. She realizes that her emotional neglect hasn't just dimmed her relationship, it's dimmed her entire spirit. And this is the breaking point for many women. It's not that she suddenly stops loving her husband, it's that she stops tolerating emotional emptiness. She's awakening to the truth that love without emotional depth isn't enough to sustain her anymore. And once a woman reaches this level of awareness, pretending becomes impossible, because the very needs she once buried have now become the core of who she is. For many women, midlife becomes the moment when the illusion of a perfect marriage begins to crumble. For years, she may have believed she had everything society said she should want: a stable home, a husband, children, a comfortable routine. From the outside, everything looks fine, even admirable. People might call her lucky or say she has a good man, but what others don't see is the emotional emptiness hiding beneath that polished surface. She has spent years trying to convince herself that this kind of love, quiet, predictable, duty-filled, is enough. She smiled at gatherings, shared pictures online, played her role. Yet deep down, she's known something has been missing. She just never had the space or courage to face it until midlife stripped away her distractions and forced her to see the truth. The illusion of a perfect marriage is built on routine and perception. It's built on the belief that if there's no visible chaos, everything must be fine. But silence doesn't always mean peace. In fact, it's often the sound of two people who stopped truly communicating long ago. Over time, the relationship becomes mechanical. Conversations revolve around children, bills, or responsibilities, not emotions or connection. Affection becomes a ritual, not an expression. She doesn't feel desired anymore, just needed. She doesn't feel seen, just expected. The man she once felt deeply connected to has become more of a partner in logistics than a partner in love. This emotional distance grows slowly, and because it happens gradually, both partners get used to it. They mistake coexistence for closeness, stability for happiness, and silence for understanding. But midlife brings a different kind of clarity. It strips away illusions, exposing the emotional truth underneath. A woman starts to see that what she's been calling a perfect marriage is actually a carefully maintained performance. She begins to see how much effort she's put into keeping the peace, avoiding confrontation, and keeping up appearances. She realizes that in trying to protect the image of her marriage, she's been betraying her own emotional needs. What once looked like love now feels like habit. What once felt safe now feels suffocating. And when she finally admits this truth to herself, it changes everything. The idea of a perfect marriage no longer comforts her. It hurts her because it reminds her of how much of herself she's hidden to keep it alive. This breaking of illusion doesn't always come with anger. Sometimes it comes with quiet sadness. She looks at her husband and realizes they've grown in different directions. They might still care for each other, but they no longer connect on the level that matters most, emotionally and spiritually. She sees that they've built a life together, but lost the intimacy that once made it feel alive. The routines that once gave structure to her days now feel like a cage. The same man who once made her feel chosen now makes her feel invisible, not because he's cruel, but because he stopped noticing her evolution. The illusion breaks when she realizes that what she truly needs, emotional depth, communication, and vulnerability, can't be replaced by material comfort or social validation. And when that illusion finally shatters, she feels both free and frightened. Free because she no longer wants to pretend. Frightened because she knows that seeing the truth means she can't go back to living in denial. The walls of her perfect marriage that once gave her identity now feel hollow, echoing with all the words left unsaid. She starts to crave honesty, even if it brings conflict, because at least honesty feels real. She no longer wants to play her role, she wants to feel alive again. This is the quiet moment where many women stop seeking validation from how their marriage looks and start asking themselves what it truly feels like. And the truth, though painful, becomes her first step toward awakening. There comes a time in a woman's life when she begins to shift from being everyone's caretaker to finally caring for herself. And that shift often happens in midlife. For years, she has been the center of everyone's world, the one who remembers birthdays, manages emotions, holds the family together, and makes sacrifices no one even notices. Her identity becomes tied to her role as a giver. She feels needed, appreciated, and relevant because she is always available. But beneath all that giving, there's a silent exhaustion that builds up over time. She's been so busy nurturing others that she's forgotten what it feels like to nurture her own heart. Midlife has a way of exposing that imbalance. It's the phase when she begins to ask, "What about me?" And for the first time, she means it. This shift doesn't happen because she stops loving her family or her partner. It happens because she starts realizing that love cannot always come at the expense of herself. She begins to see how much of her life has revolved around meeting everyone else's needs while ignoring her own. The endless emotional labor, the constant adjustments, the quiet swallowing of pain, all of it starts to weigh heavier as she gets older. She notices how rarely anyone asks what she wants, how often her feelings are dismissed, how her efforts are taken for granted. She begins to feel invisible not because others stopped seeing her, but because she stopped showing herself. She became the dependable one, the selfless one, the strong one, until one day she realizes those labels have trapped her in an identity that no longer feels true. Midlife makes her confront the cost of that selflessness. She starts to see how giving everything without boundaries has drained her emotionally and spiritually. She looks at the woman in the mirror and barely recognizes her. She wonders when she stopped dreaming, when her laughter became rare, when her desires became secondary. This realization isn't about ego or rebellion, it's about rediscovery. She begins to understand that caring for herself isn't selfish, it's survival. For so long she was taught that being a good wife or mother means putting others first. But now she sees that this mindset has left her depleted. She wants to reclaim her individuality, her voice, her sense of worth that exists beyond her roles. That desire for self-focus is often misunderstood by her partner, who may interpret it as distance or dissatisfaction. But what she's really seeking is balance, the freedom to exist as her full self, not just in service to others. As she starts turning inward, everything around her begins to shift. The way she engages in conversations changes. She no longer wants to participate in shallow exchanges or repeat old patterns of pleasing. She starts setting boundaries, saying no without guilt, expressing what she feels instead of suppressing it. She might take more time for herself, pursue passions she once gave up, or simply spend more time in silence to reconnect with her inner voice. To her husband, this change can feel unsettling. He might feel like he's losing the woman who once centered her world around him, but what he doesn't see is that she's not drifting away from him. She's returning to herself. This shift from nurturer to self-focused is both liberating and painful. It forces her to confront the years she spent neglecting her own needs and the relationships that thrived on her selflessness. It forces others to meet her differently, not as the woman who endlessly gives, but as the woman who finally expects something in return: respect, emotional reciprocity, and presence. The same traits that once made her admirable, patience, sacrifice, and unconditional giving, no longer serve her if they come at the cost of her peace. She begins to understand that true love, whether for her family or her husband, must start with self-love. Midlife teaches her that her worth was never meant to come from how much she gives, but from how deeply she lives, and that realization changes everything around her. One of the most powerful truths about relationships that surface in midlife is this: men often stay the same while women evolve. This isn't about superiority or fault. It's about emotional growth and awareness. A man's sense of identity is often tied to stability, predictability, and control. If life looks the same, he feels secure. Routine comforts him. A steady marriage, consistent lifestyle, and clear roles make him feel that everything is fine. But for a woman, emotional and spiritual growth is inevitable. She changes with time, with experience, with the seasons of her own heart. The same life that feels stable to him starts to feel stagnant to her. She begins to crave depth instead of predictability, connection instead of routine. This difference in evolution quietly creates a distance between them, one that neither fully understands at first. In her 20s and 30s, she may have found comfort in his consistency. She appreciated that he was grounded, reliable, and strong. But as the years pass, what she once saw as stability starts to feel like emotional stillness. While she continues to evolve emotionally, mentally, even spiritually, he often remains fixed in the version of himself he's always been. His priorities rarely change, but hers begin to shift. She starts questioning things she once accepted. She becomes more reflective, more self-aware. She begins to crave deeper emotional intimacy, meaningful communication, and purpose beyond daily survival. This is where the imbalance begins. The woman is growing, but the man doesn't see the need to grow with her. He doesn't feel the same inner restlessness. So while she's transforming, he's trying to preserve what already exists, and that tension silently erodes their connection. A woman's evolution in midlife is often internal, invisible to the outside world, but deeply felt within. She may not even be able to explain it at first. It starts as a quiet longing, a pull toward authenticity. She begins to see through her own patterns, to understand her emotions on a deeper level, to question the version of herself she has been playing. She wants to heal, to expand, to rediscover her individuality. But when she tries to express this to her husband, he often doesn't understand. To him, nothing's wrong. He thinks she's overthinking or being dramatic. He may even say, "Why can't you just be happy?" And those words cut deep because she's not unhappy. She's evolving. She's outgrowing the emotional environment that once felt enough. She wants to be met at a deeper level, but he's still engaging from the surface, assuming that love doesn't need to change as long as life looks stable. This gap between their emotional realities becomes one of the biggest challenges in midlife marriages. The woman's inner transformation demands truth, vulnerability, and connection. The man's resistance to change feels like rejection of that truth. He often misinterprets her growth as criticism or discontent, not realizing she's inviting him into a new phase of emotional maturity. When he dismisses or avoids that invitation, she starts to pull away. Not because she doesn't love him, but because she feels unseen in her evolution. She starts spending more time reflecting, reading, exploring, or seeking emotional understanding elsewhere. Her soul wants expansion, and if she doesn't find it within the marriage, she begins to emotionally detach from it. This is how many midlife relationships begin to fade, not because of betrayal, but because of emotional stagnation. The man feels confused, believing nothing major has changed, but everything has. She's no longer the same woman he married, and she's not meant to be. The problem isn't her growth. It's his assumption that love should remain the same while people change. When a woman evolves, she doesn't want to leave her partner behind. She wants him to grow with her. But if he refuses to step into that deeper emotional space, the relationship starts to feel like a place where she can no longer breathe. What once felt like security now feels like limitation. And what once felt like love now feels like distance. Emotional detachment before divorce doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, silent withdrawal that begins long before a woman ever thinks about leaving. On the surface, everything might still look the same. She cooks, she talks, she fulfills her responsibilities, but something inside her has already shifted. The woman who once tried to fix everything now simply stops trying. The one who used to argue now stays silent. Her silence isn't peace, it's exhaustion. It's the moment when she realizes that her words no longer reach him, that her emotions no longer matter in the space they share. It's not that she doesn't care anymore, it's that she's cared for too long without being met halfway. Emotional detachment is not the beginning of separation, it's the end of hope. For years, she's been fighting quietly, for connection, for understanding, for effort. She's asked for communication, tried to express her pain, and waited for him to notice her distance. But when nothing changes, something inside her begins to shut down. At first, it feels like numbness. She doesn't get angry like she used to, she doesn't cry as much, and she doesn't chase resolution. It's not because she's fine, it's because she's emotionally done. She reaches a point where the idea of trying feels heavier than the idea of leaving. The emotional energy that once went into saving the relationship now goes into protecting her peace. She starts to detach, not out of spite, but out of self-preservation. Her heart no longer feels safe in the same space where she once gave everything. This stage is deeply misunderstood by most men. When she withdraws emotionally, he often assumes she's finally content or has stopped overreacting. He might even feel relieved by the calm, thinking the tension is gone. But what he doesn't realize is that the calm he's sensing is actually the quiet before emotional departure. Her detachment is the absence of investment. It's her heart slowly packing away its emotions, piece by piece, preparing to live without him long before she physically leaves. He mistakes her distance for peace, not realizing it's the silence of someone who's already left emotionally. By the time he starts to notice the void, she's already too far gone to come back. This emotional detachment shows up in small ways first. She stops sharing her thoughts, stops asking for his opinion, stops seeking his comfort. The things that used to bother her no longer do, because she no longer expects anything. She stops checking if he notices her mood, stops initiating conversations, stops trying to be understood. Her world begins to shrink to herself. She focuses on her own healing, her inner peace, her personal growth. What once felt like a shared life now feels like two parallel existences under the same roof. He continues his routine, unaware that she's emotionally rewriting her story. She's not plotting revenge or dramatizing her pain. She's quietly reclaiming her emotional independence. By the time she reaches this level of detachment, it's rarely about one specific argument or moment. It's the accumulation of small neglects, the ignored feelings, the unacknowledged efforts, the lack of empathy. Each disappointment chips away at her connection until there's nothing left to hold on to. She's not angry anymore because anger requires emotional involvement. What remains is indifference, and that's far more dangerous. Once a woman reaches emotional indifference, the relationship is already over in her heart. She may stay physically present out of duty, fear, or timing, but her emotions are no longer invested. The emotional bond that once tied her to him has dissolved quietly over time, leaving behind a sense of peace that comes not from happiness, but from acceptance. So, if you've ever wondered why so many marriages fall apart in midlife, it's not because love disappears. It's because awareness begins. When a woman starts to evolve, she stops surviving and starts feeling. And that shift demands truth, not illusion. The real challenge isn't to stop change, but to grow with it. Because when two people stop meeting each other emotionally, the marriage ends